Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. This is my 2019 Volkswagen GTI. I've had it for about 5 years now. I put on close to 60,000 miles. And if you watch my latest videos or you are a subscriber to the channel because of my Subaru WRX, you've probably heard me talk about that I also own a GTI. And well, here it is. It's a Rabbit Edition in cornflower blue, one of 3,000 made for the US, one of 1,000 in this particular color. I've been thinking about moving on from this hatchback because my priorities in life are a bit different now, especially where I want a vehicle that's a bit larger and more conducive for my lifestyle at this point. Now, I have been thinking about selling it very soon, but I figured since it is in my driveway, might as well make a few videos on it, especially since there might be some of you out there looking at buying a Mk7 or 7.5 GTI, and you're looking for content, and you're also looking for maybe some reviews out there to make sure that you're making the right decision. Personally, I think the Mk7 is the best generation ever made from Volkswagen for the GTI. It's better looking than the Mk8. I know some people will say, well, the technology isn't on par with the new generation, but I think the Mk8 is a bit of a downgrade overall. Also, when you compare it to its predecessors, I think it's better than the Mk6, Mk5, Mk4, and Mk3. Some of you older enthusiasts out there will say, well, it doesn't hold a candle to the Mk1 and Mk2, and I'll give you that, especially if you want a vehicle that's more vintage. But with the Mk7.5, I've absolutely loved my time with this car, and in this video, I want to go over the reasons why I chose this car, but also why I think it is the best GTI ever made. So if you're ready, then I'm ready. Let's dive right into this video. Just like I did with the WRX, I might as well give you guys a bit of a backstory as to why I chose the GTI and if there was any other vehicles I was looking at the time, but also what were the motivational factors in choosing this hatchback. Back in 2019, I didn't know how to drive manual, so that eliminated every single option out there besides the GTI, because if I wanted an automatic, it had to be a DSG, and there was no ZF8 speeds in this price range at all for a brand new car. But before I even get to that, I was looking at buying used. I wanted a Euro car. I didn't like JDM, I didn't like Japanese cars, which is a bit comical because I own a WRX now, and I've completely fallen in love with it. But before I was even looking at buying a car and a fun daily driver, a friend of mine owned a 2015 GTI-S, and he gave me the keys to it, and I got to experience this platform, and I fell in love immediately. When it was time to buy a car, I was looking at buying a used GTI. Maybe around 2016, 2017, I wanted an SE. I wanted the LED headlights. I was having a very difficult time finding a clean GTI, but also I was having some bad luck with some dealers, and I was just getting nowhere. Now, back in 2019, I did want to have a car that drew attention. I wanted a car that kind of fit my channel back then. So if you guys don't know, I run a YouTube channel called Boston Autoblog, and the colors are blue and black for the logo. And, well, the cornflower blue caught my eye. I'm thinking, this is great. This car is going to fit the channel perfectly. And so I went with it. I maxed out my budget. I purchased it for $27,500, which was about $2,000 off MSRP, because believe it or not, back in 2019, the GTIs really weren't selling that well. The dealers were holding on to inventory quite a long time, and they were quite the bargain for sure. So I purchased it, and the rest is history from that point on. Now, what I wanted to do with this GTI was to modify it. I wanted to personalize it, make it my own, maybe even create some content around it on that main channel. Well, about 8 months later, COVID happens. I'm out of work for about 2.5 to 3 months, and that pretty much ended my dreams of modifying this car, and instead it just became my daily driver. Now you're probably wondering, okay, so you wanted to modify it, but what else was there to this car that you had to purchase it, that you had to buy it, and that you were willing to spend close to $30,000 and max out your budget? Well, I wanted a car that was a great all-arounder. I wanted a vehicle that was practical. I wanted a car that I could go to work in, but also I wanted a car that I could take to car shows. I wanted to be a part of the local car community. I wanted to go on cruises. I wanted to go on drives with my friends instead of being a passenger and just not experiencing it as an owner at all. So that's why the GTI made the most sense. But I got a lot more than I bargained for with this car, because yes, it has a sports tune suspension. Yes, it is a sporty car with a turbo 4. But fuel economy wise, I can get 32 to 35 miles per gallon if I'm driving very conservatively, which you really weren't going to find elsewhere in this segment, but also for an enthusiast car. But better yet, I was able to have my friends tag along with me on some road trips, and I was able to fit all my camera gear in the back. So this car became perfect in a sense, to a point where I just held on to it for a very long time. And even today, I'm having a bit of difficulty letting go just because it's been reliable. It hasn't left me on the side of the road. And honestly, maintenance cost wise, it's very affordable and doable. I'm spending less than $2,000 a year to maintain this hatchback. So it's economical, it's practical, it's everything you could possibly want in an enthusiast car. And that's one of the reasons why I think the Mk7 GTI is the best car you could possibly purchase at this price point. And also another thing too is that the engines are durable if you don't tune them. So if you're looking for a fun daily driver, I think the Mk7 makes the most sense. So now that we've gone over the logical reasons as to why I chose the GTI as my daily driver and my fun car, let's discuss what makes the Mk7 and 7.5 the best generation ever made from Volkswagen. And it starts off with the exterior design. Regardless of whether you go with the 7 or 7.5, this look is aging like fine wine. About a week ago, I test drove a 2015 GTI, which was a two-door. It had the 6-speed manual. I was always curious about how the manual felt compared to the DSG. And I hopped out of the car for a bit, and I looked at it, and I'm thinking, for a 10-year-old car, basically, it looks brand new. And that's a testament to the design language of the Mk7 and 7.5, but also that might be saying quite a bit about the Mk7's predecessors and also the Mark 8. I think the Mark 8 aesthetically is a downgrade, but also, and I don't want to get too ahead of myself here because I will be talking about these points about the Mk7, is that I think that this particular generation from a performance perspective, but also just even the way it was designed, was perfect, and that it couldn't be replicated with a successor. Now, for the 2019 model year, and more specifically for my GTI, this is a Rabbit edition, so I got the 18-inch Pretorias, and that was one of the reasons why I chose the car, because I loved gloss black wheels at the time, maybe not so much now, being a bit older. But also you got the gloss black side mirror caps, and also the gloss black rear spoiler. Together, these three aesthetics did make their way back on the GTI for the 2021 model year, which was the last model year for the Mark 7.5. Now, fun fact, the 2019 GTI was supposed to be the final edition, but because of COVID and factory shutdowns, and they couldn't transfer the Mark 8 over to the United States yet, they decided to go with 2 more model years, which actually I think is one of the reasons why the Mark 7.5 still looks brand new, because that wasn't too long ago. Then, of course, with the 7.5, you also got the dynamic LED headlights, which really modernized the front fascia and really looks fantastic on this car. Now, they were only available on the SE and Autobahn trims. I believe even for 2021, you couldn't get these for the S. So there was always incentives to go with the middle trim in the lineup. But even for the Mark 7, with the SE, you could get the light package where you got LED headlights. But I think, looking back on this particular generation, it doesn't matter whether you went with the S or the SE or Autobahn. It's still a fantastic car at the end of the day. I also really love the red accents that runs the entire length of the front fascia into the grille and into the headlights. It adds so much character to this car, but also goes really well with any paint color for the exterior. And then as you make your way around to the back, of course, it has that aggressive design, and of course, the dual exhaust outlets, which, again, for a car under $30,000, especially for the S, and at least for 2019 with the Rabbit edition, it just looks so good that a lot of cars in this market just can't replicate. And again, that's what makes this particular generation very nice and special. Then as you make your way inside, it really comes down to these seats, in my opinion, because no other manufacturer can get away with cloth plaid upholstery, but also no other manufacturer has ever made a vehicle where a base trim or even a model without leatherette or leather upholstery is so captivating and sought after. The fact that buyers were willing to go with a base GTI or a Rabbit edition for 2019 says quite a bit about these seats. Now, bolstering wise, they're very aggressive, they're very comfortable, they provide a lot of grip and support. And honestly, I can see why enthusiasts have loved this upholstery and these seats throughout the generations. Then for the rest of the interior, what makes the Mark 7 and 7.5 so special is the fact that it's the last of the analog interiors. Sure, you still have the infotainment system, you have a display in between the analog gauges, but unlike the Mark 8, the technology doesn't override your experience, where the Mark 8 has a full digital gauge cluster and larger infotainment system. Also with the Mark 8, you don't have physical buttons and dials, which you still have with the Mark 7 and 7.5. Now, for my model, and also, of course, the S, you did get the smaller 6.5-inch screen, which again, I think is more than adequate for a car in this market, and still today in 2024, because it gives you the bare necessities, it gives you the intuitiveness that you want to have for a car under $30,000. Also, of course, you have physical buttons and dials on both sides of the screen, again, making it very user-friendly. Also, you have dials beneath the screen for your climate control. So really, to me, it's a very driver-centric interior, but also an enthusiast-focused interior as well. Another highlight for the interior is the leather-wrapped steering wheel. To me, it just really captivates you the minute you step inside and take this car out for a test drive. Ultimately, it's the performance and the driving experience that has made the Mark 7 and 7.5 such a great car at the end of the day and historically. When you're comparing this to the Mark 8, because the Mark 8 does have more horsepower and pound-feet of torque, you can replicate that with the Mark 7 and 7.5 with a Stage 1 tune and also with aggressive rear sway bars. And you're saving money in the long run. Whereas with a Mark 8, you're spending $35,000 for a base GTI brand new, whereas you could buy a lightly used 7.5 for around $25,000, which I think the Mark 7.5 makes more sense. Now, performance-wise, near the end of this generation, you got 228 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque. You had the choice between a 7-speed DSG and 6-speed manual. Also, the Golf R brakes were made standard, where they were an optional feature for the Mark 7, because the Mark 7 got 210 horsepower, 258 pound-feet of torque, and you get a performance package boosting it to 220 horsepower. And of course, you got those Golf R brakes. But also more importantly with the Mark 7 is that you got a 6-speed DSG, which I love that DSG more so than the 7-speed DSG. That transmission is more tuned for aggressive driving than the 7-speed. I think the 7-speed is a bit too much. It just adds one more gear that's not necessary. And I think the gear ratios and the shift points in the 6-speed is more enthusiast focused than the 7-speed DSG. Now, with the manual transmission, I don't really like the manual with this car. I think the DSG is the better transmission at the end of the day. It's quicker, it's more fun to drive in manual mode. I think with the manual, there's not much to it. It's lacking. And I'm surprised for a German car, because you would think that the Germans would give you something more engaging and enticing, and that just isn't the case. But regardless of that, when you are driving this car on a back road, you're having some fun, with the sports tune suspension, with the Golf R brakes, you have the braking ability, you have the handling and the cornering that really makes this car out of the box fantastic, because there's no other enthusiast-focused car at this price point back in 2019, or really even today, in my mind, that could replicate what the GTI is giving you. Because for one, it's 4 doors, so it's practical, it's family-friendly. But also, you have drive modes where you can have it be a bit more quiet, more comfortable, especially with the Autobahn trim, with the DCC system. But also, if you don't have the DCC, this sports tune suspension doesn't abuse you. You're not getting thrown around when you are encountering the bumps and imperfections in the roads. But also one thing I've learned with this car, and why I do love the GTI in this market, is that it really truly is a grand tour. I've taken this car out on some very long road trips out to upstate New York a few times, and I gotta be honest, I didn't feel tired or fatigued. My passengers didn't feel tired or fatigued. And that really does go a long way, because with my WRX, I have to be honest, I've daily driven it for a while, and up here in New England, that suspension abuses you. But with that, you get, in my opinion, better handling, especially where the rear end feels flatter in the corners. And that was one of my issues with the Mark 7.5 and why I think you have to go with the rear sway bar, because to me, I feel like the rear end is too light, where when you are cornering, there's not much feedback outside of the steering. And I want to have that flat feel to the rear end, and that's why I think that you should go with a rear sway bar. And while a lot of younger enthusiasts and maybe power-hungry individuals are going to say having anything less than 300 horsepower just isn't enough, I completely disagree with that sentiment. And what I'm going to say here is this, that whether you plan on modifying this car or keeping it stock to make it more reliable long-term and just with this car maybe being your daily driver, I think you're going to love this car for years on end. But also, even though a lot of people have told me that you're going to get bored with the stock power, I also disagree with that as well. I think this car right here, out of the box, keeping it stock, this is the best performance package you'll ever receive in this market historically. And I'm not saying that because I'm biased, because I do think that when you look at what the VA Subaru WRX was giving buyers, probably in the horsepower department and also with the manual, was a better choice than the GTI, especially with the all-wheel drive system. But with the GTI as a front-wheel drive hatchback, the fact that it is practical, it's comfortable for what it is, I really don't know what else you could possibly demand in this car. But also, again, you have that aftermarket support that can remedy anything that you find unsatisfying with the Mark 7 and 7.5. And then getting back to why this is the best generation, it's because it's built on the best platform that we've ever seen in this market. If you're somebody who doesn't drive a manual, you prefer having automatic, the DSG is the most engaging. But also another thing too, is that when it comes back to that horsepower, when it comes back to what you're getting here performance-wise, you're not going to get that with the Mark 6, you're not going to get that with the Mark 5, and as I already said before with the Mark 8 just isn't giving you enough to justify spending over $35,000. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more. Also, let me know in the comment section if you want to see more GTI content on the channel. But guys, once again, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.